Hello friends and welcome back to the channel. It has been a minute since I've done one of these gameplay videos, but I've been having so much fun with my rank 4 Mojo that I could not pass on the opportunity to show off some of his damage and utility. If you haven't seen the rank up video, there will be a link to it up at the top right corner here, so go check that out. But otherwise, let's jump right in to some gameplay. Alright, we're going to start today with a fight from Act 743 with a node called Civil War Zone. And the way this node works is that when you hit into the opponent, they gain a permanent armor up buff, and when they use a special attack, those armor ups are converted into fury buffs. So the goal here is to make sure that the anti-life field is active when they have a special attack available, so that all those fury buffs are then converted into degen. And you can see here in a second, the degens are putting in a hefty amount of damage, over 7,500 damage per second. I am running 4 out of 5 MD here, that's pretty standard for me, and frankly I feel like it's a bit too much power. So a couple times in this fight here, there's just so many buffs expiring that it's forcing me to use my special 3, which is fine, but the special 2 with Mojo is really where all the big damage is. So you can see we're basically playing this fight more or less normally. We're about to get a special 2 off finally in this fight. That's really nice damage. But other than that, continue to hit into him, getting those armor up buffs and letting him convert them into furies, and then letting himself degen to death. So my Mojo is max sig, and when he's fully ramped up at 5 million followers, he gets this huge fury buff, and at max sig that actually triples his attack here. So Corvus is going to use his special 2, and the degen for that is absolutely crazy. That is over 13k damage per second, and as soon as we finish this special 3, that is all she wrote. Okay, this next fight is from Act 742. It's against Sersi, who's one of the more annoying defenders in the game, especially in Battlegrounds, if you don't have a really solid counter. So with the anti-life field up, all of her buffs, she gets glancing, she gets regen, she gets power gain, all of them expire pretty much right away, so we don't really have to worry about them at all. This path also has power shield. You can see the big damage there from that special 2 I just threw. So one of the things I wanted to point out in this fight is that I entered this fight without Mojo being ramped up at all. He starts the quest at 1 persistent charge, and you really don't need to have him ramped up to take a fight like this all the time, because as long as you're completing prompts right away, he ramps up during a fight pretty quickly here. And I think this special one here ends the fight. So, a pretty fast fight, a really good counter for Sersi, especially in Battlegrounds, going forward. Okay, before I show off the next few fights, I do want to talk briefly about a synergy that makes Mojo even better, and that's this one that Clairvoyant has with Ghost Rider, which reduces buff duration by 30%. So when Mojo has the anti-life field active, buff duration is already reduced by 90%. And when you put these together, most buffs that an opponent gains are going to expire instantly. It's almost like the buff just never happens, but you'll still gain the power from Mystic Dispersion, you'll still gain the degen when it expires. It's definitely not required for these next few fights, but it does make them go a lot faster, as you'll see. Okay, next up we have a Footloose path from Act 742. So Footloose is the node where every time the opponent uses a special attack, they go unstoppable and get a chance to evade. So since both of these annoyances come in the form of buffs, as long as you have your field up when they use a special, they're going to expire pretty much immediately. So in the event that you're unable to use a champion with slow for whatever reason, Mojo really counters this node well. Diablo a little bit uncooperative in this fight and really draws out the fight longer than normal. But you can see every time he uses a special attack, you'll see the HUD call out there for unstoppable, but the buff won't actually appear because it's expiring immediately and being converted into degen. So the point here is that even when you are faced with a defender that doesn't have a lot of or any buffs of their own to take advantage of, as long as even the node itself has buffs that you can take advantage of, Mojo can still be a very effective counter. Okay, this next one is really good. This is the Act 6.2.6 champion boss. Now this guy is absolutely not the roadblock that he used to be, but it's still really satisfying to see how well Mojo counters him, and with next to no effort. So even with the Claire and Ghost Rider synergy here, the champion's unstoppable buffs are still lasting for a few seconds, but we're getting so much power back from Mystic Dispersion that we can almost always nullify them with the SP1 if we need to. We're 30 seconds into the fight, he's already under 50%. We're firing off special after special, melting him with the degen, keeping his unstoppable, his furies, his regen all under control. And just under a minute into the fight here, we're going to have him down to the final phase, 10%. And from there, it's really just getting in those special 1 dexes to remove his indestructible. This was one of the fights, you know, I haven't done many solos of the champion in my time. This only took me like 2 or 3 tries to get. It's so easy. And I know the fight has been nerfed a couple times, and he's much easier than he was before. But regardless of how easy the fight itself is now, Mojo is still one of the best champion boss counters in the game. So they did remove the prowess, so it does take a couple extra specials to kill him once we remove this final indestructible. But yeah, just an incredibly easy fight with Mojo, and one of the most fun fights I've done for this video for sure. Alright, so we finally removed his last indestructible. Fire off this special too. It unfortunately does not kill him, but again, we're getting so much power back, we can immediately fire off another special 1. That doesn't kill him, but the degen does. There we go. Okay, next up we have the infamous annoying Hyperion from Act 634. Now this is a fight that can end really badly for you almost immediately just because of the ridiculous amount of power gain that Hyperion gets. So his natural power gain is kicked up to 11 from the improved power gain node, and Aspect of Evolution means that the longer the fight goes on, the harder it's going to be for you to keep him from getting that SP3. So the strategy in this fight very similar to other fights in that you want to keep the anti-life field active as much as possible, which is going to keep Hyperion's natural power gain buff under control. You're also going to see me use my special 1 quite a bit to nullify that power gain buff whenever I can, even if the field is active. Now, Hyperion is the first fight on this path, so there's no way to ramp Mojo's persistent charges beforehand, and that means we won't have access to the Fury buff and our big damage until about halfway through the fight. And I mention this because not being able to ramp Mojo on a previous fight is not as much of a headache as you might think. It's really easy and fast to ramp him during a fight because the prompts are only a few seconds apart, and if you can get like 4 or 5 prompts done early in a row, you'll be fully ramped up in no time. Hyperion also being uncharacteristically cooperative in this fight, so we're never really in danger of taking an SP3, but that's also due in part to us keeping a tight lockdown on that power gain. Mojo making what is a very difficult fight look pretty simple, and down he goes. Okay, next we have the King Groot boss from Act 743. I included this one specifically because this King Groot has a health pool of over 700,000, plus he has access to that crazy regen to extend his health pool even further. So Mojo, of course, counters all of this, absolutely plows through this King Groot in about 100 seconds. I think at one point in the fight, the degen gets up to around 15,000 damage per second with only like 9 degen passives active. I'll let the rest of the fight play out here, but I did want to point out how, you know, most Mystics are thought of as more utility heavy, not really big damage, but in an ideal matchup like this, Mojo can absolutely dominate a large health pool in a relatively short amount of time. Just disgusting amounts of damage for a matchup with a lot of buffs for him to take advantage of. So it's fair to say that every one of the fights that I've shown you thus far have been ideal matchups for Mojo, where there are a lot of buffs for him to take advantage of to turn into degen. And you might be asking yourself, you know, how does he perform in a fight where there are little to no buffs for him to use? So Mojo actually has the ability to put buffs on the defender in order to power his mechanics. Only a few Mystic champions in the game have this ability. It's very handy in non-ideal matchups. So to illustrate this, we're going to do a simple fight against Winter Soldier. Now when Mojo reaches 5 million followers, he will start to place hater buffs on his opponent. And this is going to happen whenever a prompt is completed, and you'll have a chance on every hit to place one as well. So let's fast forward to about 40 hits into the fight, and Mojo is fully ramped up. Alright, that should be good. So we've got a hater buff on the opponent, and while it's not doing a ton of damage when it's converted to a degen, The more important thing to note here is that we're still gaining power when it expires via Mystic Dispersion, which means that Mojo essentially has the ability to increase his access to special attacks without requiring a defender to have any buffs of their own at all, either from the node or from the champion's mechanics themselves. The more power means more SP2s, which is where Mojo's real damage comes from. Now, am I saying that you're going to want to use Mojo over someone else in the situation like this? Probably not, but this is a problem that a lot of Mystic champs have that Mojo gets around, and it's nice to have that in your back pocket if you need it someday. Alright, the last fight I have for you today is a bit of a fun one. This is Old Man Logan from the Labyrinth of Legends, which is one of the most buff-heavy matchups in the game. He's got 1.5 million health, and as you're going to see, the degen reaches silly levels of damage output. I think at several points in this fight, I do more than 20,000 damage per second just from the degen. Just a really, really fun fight to see him get through. So I'm going to let the rest of this fight play out, but that's going to do it for this video. If you've enjoyed it, I would greatly appreciate you hitting that like button, and be sure to subscribe to get access to all the videos that I have coming up. As always, thank you very much for watching. We'll see you again next time.